Hi there and welcome to another video. Today we're going to build a research paper summarizer using ChatGPT's API or OpenAI's API. The research paper summarizer is effectively going to take in a PDF as a file and return to you a summarized version of that PDF. And we do that based on instructions that we've input. And that is what you can see here. I've showed you on the screen. What we're doing is we're using an API from OpenAI and their new Assistants API, which is in beta at the moment. So currently this is likely to change, this code, but I thought I'd get something working and show you how you can build your own AI assistant. So an AI assistant is something that specializes in a particular purpose. It might be helping you read documentation. It might help you set home temperatures in your Internet of Things home space. So if I get into it, I can show you actually what this is. We've got this AI package, which is Vercel, the company that kind of owns or built NextJS. They've built a package called AI, and it allows you to easily interface with various different AI APIs. It just makes things easier, abstracts away a lot of the logic there, but this really just helps you bring it into Next.js. And so they've got an example here. This is the assistant setup, home automation assistant example. You can see here, you're an assistant with access to a home automation system. This is the instructions for the AI. In this case, OpenAI's ChatGPT. And I give it some functions. We won't be using functions here. In fact, we're going to be sending it files. And yeah, that's pretty much it. If I show you this website, you can see here we've got an assistant. And so you need to actually create the assistant in the OpenAI dashboard before you can use it in your code. So you create the assistant, you've got the ID of the assistant, there's the instructions, the name. It's very similar to building a GPT in ChatGPT's interface where you create your own GPT, except in this case, you can do it for anything on the code level. As you can see here, they actually had a support request for the OpenAI assistants. This is quite recent, and they released a package, which is this one, which we were just viewing here a couple of weeks ago. So it's quite cutting edge stuff, and it's likely to change. I just thought I'd show you how I've implemented this and how you could use this for your own assistant project. If we go into here, we can click into the API. So that's this link here is platform.openai.com/apps. Click into the API, and then we have our dashboard. What we want to do here is we want to go to API keys and we want to create a new API key to use in our project. Then we need to go to assistants and we need to create a new assistant with custom instructions. And so I've done all that already and I've built something here. So I'll show you how it works. If we just open up this, I've got the concept of collective unconscious paper that I found on Google Scholar. So I'm just going to put that in there, and it's got summarize research paper. And if I the thing with the OpenAI assistants, there's a few limitations to the assistants actually. So I'll show you what those are. We go to assistant. So you can see it's in beta, and some of the limitations right at the bottom. How assistants work. Here we go. So we've got these limitations here. Let's see if this is complete. Okay, there we go. So it's come back. This paper discusses the concept of the collective unconscious, a key element, right? And it's just basically summarized a paper based on the instructions that I've given it. And so if we want to take a quick look at this paper, you can see what it's summarized. So all this content here, it's read through it, and it's given me a summary based on my instructions. But yeah, back to the limitations. During this beta, there are several known limitations we are looking to address in the coming weeks and months. We will publish the changelog on the page when we add support for additional functionality. Supporting for streaming output, including messages and run steps. Supporting notifications to share object status updates without the need for polling. Support for DALL-E or browsing as a tool, so it can't do internet browsing. That's what I would have typically gone for here for summarizing the research paper, because you could have just given it a URL to a PDF. And support for user message creation with images. I think also, yeah, so the streaming output one, as you saw before, where it was reading, typically when you integrate with the ChatGPT API, you get a streaming response where it quickly responds and it starts streaming text content. But in this case, you just get the full response when it comes back. So they haven't got support for streaming yet. And with that said, we might as well jump in. I am going to open up this project. This is a NextJS project. I created it using Create Next app, and I've added a few things. It is pretty much the default configuration from the Create Next app, but we've added some packages like React icons, React slot, the environment variables here, AI package, which is an important one, OpenAI package, a few others, a bit of animation from frame of motion, and just some validation stuff here. And the rest of it really is just UI stuff, so like class names and React Markdown, just to make sure that this response is in Markdown, because they send back a Markdown response and we want to show that properly to the user with like bold titles, etc. And we have our environment variables. I have created an example environment variable file, so I will push this up to a GitHub repository so you can get the source code from it after this. And what else do we have? Another thing that I noticed as we were building this was that the tools that are used from the AI package is like a customized configuration. I didn't use what they provided because it didn't allow you to upload files, and I wanted to be able to upload a file so I could demonstrate how that's possible during this video. So this assistant API, if we actually go to the API, we go to the assistant, the page, we have this use assistant hook, and this hook only allows you to submit a body in the request. So when you make a post request to the route handler, you're only able to submit the body of the request, meaning it's got to be JSON format, and I wasn't able to do that with a file, or at least it would have been a bit of a workaround to do that with a file. You might be able to put it in the URL parameters or something, but it made sense to me to be able to upload the file and then submit the form with form data, because Next.js is going in that direction anyway. There with server actions, you use a form data, and I'm sure at some point, once this is improved, you will be able to use a server action to implement this. But for now, we're using route handlers, and in order to get this use assistant hook to work with route handlers, I had to change things up a bit. I had to bring some of the code from the hook that they created into the repository. So that is what this file contains, this directory. I'm not going to go through this because honestly, I won't be able to explain all of this to you. It is quite comprehensive in terms of streaming and lots of stuff that, would have taken me hours to go through. So I just copied it from their use assistant hook, and this allowed me to then change the way the hook works a bit. So I'm actually able to send a request as form data rather than with a body, because the limitation that the hook had was we were not able to send it in the body, a file at least. With that said, I will let you review this in your own time, but just know that I didn't create this code. This is directly from the user assistant hook. The components folder just contains some basic UI like icons, paperclip, arrow, spinner, a button, and an input. And then we have a layout. And what we are going to build is the page and the route handler. So we'll start by creating a new directory called assistant. And in that directory, we're going to create a route handler. So first, we can start off by import the use assistant, which is actually experimental use assistant as use assistant. So we are still using the hook. However, we've just expanded on its capabilities. Next, we will import the OpenAI package. We also want to import the types. So import message, content, text. We're going to import our environment variables. We want to import next request, Zod, and Zod form data. Now we can start with our schema. So const schema equals Zod form data dot form data. Now we want to put in the thread ID, and this is optional. So the thread ID is effectively the message thread ID. So when you first submit the message, you will effectively create the thread ID and get that back in the response. So what we want to do here is we want to make this optional, because initially on the first request, we are not passing in anything undefined. And we got message, which is Zod form data.text. We got file, which is actually going to be z.z instance of blob. The reason we have to do a blob here is because when we pass in the file in the form, when you submit a file in a form, and correct me if I'm wrong, but it creates a blob from the form. So when you're sending a file as form data, it is sending it as a blob to the server. And we can just do const OpenAI equals new OpenAI key. So you want to do OpenAI API key. This needs to be API key. And then importantly, we want to export const runtime equals edge. Cool, let's get into creating the post request. So export async. So as I mentioned, we want to get the form data. So we want to do await request dot form data. Now we want to use our schema to validate the incoming data and parse it so that it turns into some JSON object rather than getting it via the form data, which can be a bit of a nuisance. So solid form data package is good for that because it allows you to convert it into a JSON format. Const data equals schema.parse input. Okay, then we want to get the file. So we want to do const file equals new file. We want to do data.file, data.file.name, type data.file.type. Let's just call this file PD or file. In fact, we might want to install the MIME types package. So p-add MIME types, import MIME from MIME types, p-add -d at types MIME type. Then we want to just get the const extension equals mime.extension data.file.type. That allows us to just append the file extension. So we'll do file.extension. So now we need to get our thread ID. So thread ID equal to, I'm going to check actually if data.thread ID exists. If it does, we get the thread ID. If it doesn't, we do await OpenAI.threads.create. So I need to add better here, bet.threads.create. And then that should give us a new thread. We want to just get the ID from that, put that in parentheses. And now we've got our ID. Cool. Then we want to get our OpenAI file because what OpenAI does is it consumes the file, it effectively uploads it to the dashboard so that we can keep reusing that file if we need to. In this case, we're just sending it once, but we still need to create the file. And we do that by creating it via the API. So we need to get the type OpenAI.files.file object or null. And we could just set that as null for now. We do if file.size is more than 0, and we want to create the file like that. Purpose is going to be system. So now we've stored the file against the OpenAI file variable. What we want to do is get the file ID, send that off to OpenAI and get a response back from the Assistants API. So now we want to create the message, and the message is going to be content data.message. We're going to have the role, which is user in this case, as user, and then we have our file IDs, and that's going to be that. Now we want to send off our API requests, and we do that by const response equals, there we go. We've got threads, messages here, and we want to do create. And that should be enough. Let's have a look. String or undefined. Maybe just put a bang there. There we go. Cool. We've got our response. Now we want to return the use assistant. I want to pass in the thread ID, the message ID. Let's see what we got. We need to pass in the, that was my bad. We should be doing experimental assistant response. Cool. We've got our response, but we don't have both arguments. The next argument is a async function. There we go. This actually has a message and, message ID and a send message. Okay, I've got these quite annoying TypeScript helpers on here. So let me just get rid of these TypeScript. Cool, we've got our send message function and a message ID. So what we're doing here is we're destructuring the form data. We are parsing it into a JSON object. We're getting the extension of the file that's been uploaded. We're creating a new file on the server based on that data that's coming in from the form data. We're getting the thread ID, which is either a new ID if it's the first message being sent, or it is a existing ID, which we pass in from the front end or from the client. Then we have this variable temporarily setting a variable OpenAI file. We are setting it in this if statement. If the file.size is more than 0, should probably send an error. Well, actually no, because we want to be able to just send a message. But if you were to send a message, it would get confused. The AI would be like, where's the file that I'm supposed to be reviewing? Because the instructions are based on the file being there. And then we're creating our message to be sent, and we're creating it using the OpenAI API. Then we're returning an experimental assistant response that abstracts away the loading part in the UI where it's loading and And Vercel have obviously spent some time on this, which is why we have this lib file with all their extra kind of tools that we use. And so that's part of this experimental package. It takes in the thread ID and the response, and ultimately it returns a response. So let's continue. The next thing we want to do is run the assistant on the thread. We do that by doing const run equals await openai.threads.runs.create. We pass in our thread ID, and then we've got to open this object, and we have assistant ID, and that's where we pass in our OpenAI Assistant ID, or we throw new error OpenAI Assistant ID. Just wrap this in parentheses and a function there. I want to run that. So we're actually running the thread here. Now we want to do async function wait or run. We have run is openai.beta.threads.run. Open that up and we do a while loop. So we want to do run.status is queued or run.status is in progress. So while the status is queued or in progress, we await new promise and set a timeout. We can do 500 milliseconds here. Then we want to get the run. So we want to retrieve the run like that. Cool. That way it allows us to check for the status of the run to make sure that it's not cancelled or anything like that. So we can do if run.status, if.includes run.status, we can do cancelled, cancelling, expired, failed, and then throw new error is run.status. So that will check whether or not the run, which is the API request to OpenAI's LLM, is running successfully. And if it isn't, we're polling the server to make sure that it's not failed in any way. And if it does fail, we throw an error. Then we do a wait for run, and we pass in the run like that. Finally, we want to create our response. So we do const response messages equals, we do an await openai.beta.thread.messages.list thread ID, open up an object after is going to be our response.id, because we want to get that from this here. So we've created our message. We want to pass that into the list method on the messages API. And then we want to order by ascending. Cool. And then we actually want to get the data from the response here, .data. Cool. So we've got our response messages. Now we just want to run for const message of response messages. We're looping through the messages, and then we're going to use the send message from here. Going to use this send message, which is passed in as one of the arguments from the experimental assistant response. Let's see, message here. And so this is actually the assistant message here. So we're using that, and then we're going to pass in the message ID into the send message as well. Actually, I realized that this is supposed to be the thread ID. There we go. That was my bad. And we can probably rename this to, actually, let's leave it like that. We've got thread ID, but then we're also just taking it in, we're consuming the thread ID in here. So that will be passed, and we use that here and there as well. So we are looping through our messages, and we want to send in the ID, message.id, role is going to be use assistant, and then the content, which is going to be message.content.filter, content.type is equal to text as array message content text. And that is pretty much it for the API response. We can get rid of that. It's looking pretty good. So now we want to create the UI, because at the moment, if we go back to here, we've got this running on localized 3000. I just go to 3000. We've got a 404 page. So we need to actually create the page, which we can do in here. So we go to our app, we can do in here. So if we go to our app page.tsx and we create a new page, this page is going to have to be use client, because we are using a hook, and we want to export default page. Let's just do assistant page. So we're going to start with our prompt. So const prompt equals summarize this research paper. That's our default prompt. Then we want to get the text or the messages. We want to set messages equals use state, just an empty array for now. Also want to get a message, use state. We can actually pass in the prompt here. So the default state is the summarize this research paper. We also want to get our file so we can show appropriate information about the file on the UI. We can set that default as undefined. So let's just do string here, and that's going to be an array of messages. This will be a file or undefined. We want to get our thread ID set thread ID is equal to string or undefined. We want to get an error just in case there's an error. Set error equals string or undefined. In fact, we can do unknown or undefined, and we could probably make this default to an empty string. And we want to get our status, whether or not it's loading. Set status equals use state, and we don't have to do string there. We can do in progress, or actually we can do assistant status, and we'll just set this to default to awaiting message. Now we want to get a file input ref, so that's a use ref from React, and an input element. We're going to set that to null or null. Okay, so let's start building out the page. Main, this is where our content is going. So let's just make sure this actually shows up on the UI. Yeah, okay. So we got this content here. Let's just give it some styles. Class name equals flex min h screen flex call p24. Open up a div, class name flex call w full max width xl mx auto and stretch. That's our container. Do a h1, which is research paper summarizer. Put in one of these. I give it some styles. Text 3x text white font extra bold and a padding at the bottom. Cool. Let's see where we're at with this. Nice. So under this, we want to check if there's an error, and if there is, we need to basically show the error. Does not equal null relative px6. Cool. Let's just put error. Nice. So now we want to do status is in progress. We want to show that loading spinner. Do span class name flex cap x2. Just want to import our icons dot spinner class name is equal to animate spin w66. So that's good. So I should just give this maybe a little bit smaller. Reading, and then we can do dot dot dot. Next step is to create our form. So we want to do form dot flex dot items start. Let's call p4 pp2 text by max wxl. So that allows us to put in the form at the bottom. So if I just do input and I look at the input here and I do placeholder equals research, should we just do prompt? Actually, we can do, placeholder for now. Summarize this research paper. Cool. Now we have our form. We want to add on submit equals handle form submit. And so we can actually get into creating this in a minute, but let's just continue building out our forms. We've got if flex items start w full. I'm going to bring in our input. Want to disable this input when the status is in progress. Class name flex1 placeholder is text white bg neutral 900. We can actually make this prompt as well. Prompt. And then on change, we want to set the message input, so we can create those in a minute. Next thing is we want a button. Button wants to contain a icon. Icon dot arrow right. You can do text gray or 300, hover text white, transition all, duration 200, ease in out. That's just some nice little animation there. And then this button actually wants to be type equals submit, variant equals ghost, last name equals flex 0 ml2 cursor pointer, and it can also be disabled when status is in progress. All right, let's check that out. Okay, we have got our error component, we've got this, and we've got our summarize this research paper. So we still need to add our add file. So let's do that. So another button. Do we want to do file? If we have a file, we want to do file.name, class name, flex gap x1, group, cursor, pointer, text create, 300 px1 pb0. We want to put in our hidden input here for our file. So this is going to be file, and that file input ref, before we need to add that to this, ref equals file input ref on change handle file change. I can actually comment that out for now because we're going to create these three, this one and this, to create all of those. And then because this is hidden, we're going to give it a class name of SR only. That hides it from the UI. And then let's just wrap this in a span. Cool, that looks good. Just add the paperclip icon, paperclip, give it some class names like that. Okay, let's check that out. Perfect. Paperclip's a bit big, but we will reduce the size. W4, H4. There we go, much nicer. So at the moment, none of this actually works, doesn't do anything. We've got our submit, you can see that's submitting by this up here. That isn't doing anything, got our input. So now we want to update or create these on-change handlers. So let's do that. Let's start by doing the file change. We'll set the file like that. And then we want to actually give this button a click handler. So on click handle file on click. We also can do with disabled equals status awaiting, in progress. It's going to be a type of button. So yeah, we've got this handle file on click. We are going to basically use the ref against the input to click it, because currently, because the input is hidden and we do that for stylistic reasons, we are not able to click on it. But what we can do is use this reference to that element to trigger that click event. So let's do const handle that equals, and we do file, if file input ref.current, we click it. So let's see, refresh, handle that. There we go. And now if I upload this, it should technically show the file name because of this code here. Yeah, okay, we've got the file. Great. So the next thing is the handle message input. So actually pretty simple. We just want to set the state of the message. Const handle message input equals, and we want to set message event.target.value. We can test this now by console.log message. So that is setting the state here. So let's just check. Summarize. Yeah, looks good to me. Cool. Now the big one, which is the handle form submit. So let's just go to const handle form submit equals, we want to take in the event, and we want to do event.prevent default. If status is in progress, we return, and then we set the status of in progress. So we don't want people to be able to double click that, because that is just going to be costly, because it costs to use the OpenAI API. We set the status to in progress. They're not able to re-click it if it is in progress. Then we set messages, and we get the prev state, and we return. Prev state is actually messages, and we return an array of prev state, and then we pass in the first message, which is the one we've just created in the input. If we had a thread, we would have multiple messages in there, but in this case we're passing in the first message. So this will be empty for now. Open this up. We want to do ID is nothing. We want the content to be message, and we want the role to be user. This needs to be as user. This needs to have a bang against it. What is this error? We're passing in the wrong type here. Get this message like that. That wants to be a message. There we go. We're setting our messages on the first run. This is the first message we set. And so that will give you an immediate response back on the UI. It will show that you've sent this message. Now we want to create some form data. We want to do that by using new form data. And we want to get form data.append. We want to append the message. Now we want to append the thread ID. And finally, we want to append the file. And then we want to send off the response. So we've got const result equals await fetch API/assistant, which is where our route handler is. We want to make that a post request, and we want to send the body as the form data. As I mentioned before, we're sending form data. If this was just a file, if that was just file like that, it wouldn't work. So you can't actually pass in the file here. let's get back to it. We've passed in our form data, and then we're accessing that with request.form data. So we can actually set file as undefined here because we've got the file, we've appended it to the form, and now we can just set the state back to undefined, so it removes it from the UI. We've got our result, so we've sent off the form data in the request. Now what do we want to do with that? So we want to do if result.body is equal to null. I want to do throw new error, no response body. Otherwise we for await const type value of read data stream. So this is where we start using these lib packages, read data stream here. We do result.body.get reader. Open that up. We also want to catch. Now we want to do a switch statement. I want to switch by the type from here. And if the type is case.assistant message, we want to set messages, pre-state message. Actually, let's just rename this to message. Close that off. We'll do message or messages. And then we want to do ID value.content value.id value.role. This is actually going to be 0.text.value. There we go. So we've handled the case where it's an assistant message. Now we want to handle the case where it is assistant control data. So here we want to set the thread ID, and we are not getting. Let's just type this value as .thread ID. So we set the thread ID. Then we want to set messages, get the messages, message, and then we want to return an array. We want to actually return an array here, but first we want to destructure this. So we want to get the last message, which is, we get the index of the array -1, and then we get the last message, set the last message ID, and we get that. Yeah, that looks good. Then we return .messages.slice 0 messages.length -1, and then we pass in our last message like that. So we've set the thread ID from the response, setting the thread ID here. We have to do a bit of nifty TypeScript here, and then we set the messages again. And we also forgot to include a break here. So break. And in the case of an error, we set an error and we break. So right at the end, we want to set status or waiting message. So that should be it pretty much for the handle form submit. So let's just see. We pass that in as the on submit. We've got all of our statuses here. So let's just test it out. We've got an error at the moment, which where is that coming from? So error does not equal undefined. There we go. Yeah, that should be fine. Cool. So now we can just test to see if this form is actually being submitted. We do that by adding the file, summarize, and we can just check here in the requests. We've got this selected in the network. We can see if that's, there we go. Okay, we got an error. So let's just see form data being passed in, summarized, no thread ID, final is binary, and the response here is can't resolve path, props, page props. Not very helpful, but let's have a look. Okay, let's check the console. Can't resolve path on route. API assistant route.ts. Let's check. May have something to do with the MIME types, to be honest. Let's just check. If we remove MIME types and we just call that file. Let's give it a go. Can't, yeah, there it is. Just get rid of MIME types then, because it's on the edge. So we can remove that. We can just call this file for now. We're not storing it anywhere. We're just asking for a response. So it doesn't really need a name for now. We just refresh that page, test it again. Oh, MIME types is still giving us an error. Let me just MIME types, remove at types, MIME types, dev. All right. Cool. So we have this, summarize. Reading. Okay, nice. So it's giving us this. Let's have a look at the network. Looks good. No response yet. I guess it's still reading. Sometimes I've tried testing this and sometimes it is fiddling. Not always does it work, but yeah, we'll see. Okay, could be waiting here a while, so let's just check and see what we've got. Oh, there we go. Nice. The paper you provided explores the content, so we did get a successful response there. That is unusual for doing this. Usually there's some issues, but that's good. So go back to the page. We actually want to just show the messages now. So we can just get them here. If we do messages.map, message is a message, return a div, got our message ID. Okay, seems to have pretty much filled everything out for me. Missing a parentheses. So let's check it out. Okay, so it's giving me that. Let's just redo this because it doesn't look very good. Class name equals white space, pre-wrap style equals color. Now we actually want to create a function. This is a role to color map, and we can just get rid of that. So the role to color map will allow us to effectively show different colors based on who the role is. So system, user, function, assistant. In this case, we're just having light green and the user, which is white. So we can do color, role to color map, message.role. We want to do strong message.role. And then we actually can do React Markdown, and we can pass in the message content like that. React Markdown will just help us format the Markdown. There we go. And we can just add some spacing. So now that should look good. Let's check it out. So if we go back, refresh the page, I just go to Google Scholar and I open up hexacode test or typing test, typing speed. And we've got this PDF here. Okay, so it's not too long. Don't think it will break anything, but let's see. And upload this one, and because it's got the default prompt, I should be able to just submit like that. There we go. So as you can see, immediately get our own feedback. It's reading the document. Fingers crossed. Sometimes takes a while, but hoping for the best. Now and again, it does a good summary, so we'll see. Got there eventually. So we have the research paper titled Investigating Touchscreen Typing, the Effect of Keyboard Size and Typing Speed, conducted 2 studies to assess the impact of keyboard size on typing speed and error. Wow, that is impressive. So it's done it. It has summarized that entire PDF, which was this one here. It has summarized all this content into something concise and easy to understand. That I'm very happy with. I think it's a great tool. You can do this for absolutely anything. It doesn't have to be limited to a research paper summarizer. You could upload any file. Bear in mind there are limitations of the Assistants API, but it will obviously over time improve. And I'm sure Vercel's AI package, which is Vercel AI, is here. You've got this sdk.vercel.ai. You've got a whole kind of range of products that you can use. And in this case, we're just using the kind of cutting edge stuff, but over time, it will become more robust and you probably will be able to do internet browsing at some point. So you'll be able to create absolutely anything. And yeah, I think such a cool tool to use. I hope that was useful, and if you did find it useful, please remember to give it a thumbs up. As always, thank you for watching, and please remember to leave any comments below. If you have any suggestions for future videos and you want me to continue creating more videos around AI, please leave a comment. I'm going to reply to it. Yeah, thank you as always for watching, and have a great day.